Hello and welcome to the Skippy and Fanny Show's Torture Cinema.
Who says the art of the intertitle ended with the 1920s?
Oh, David, we're going to have so many conversations today. I'm Shaun.
I'm David.
I'm Trish.
And today we are talking about 1964's Motley Crue movie, The Monster of Camp Sunshine, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Nature, which may or may not be a legitimate movie. It was written and directed by Frank Leroger. Is that French, David? Is that a real name?
It's very likely a pseudonym. Nobody knows who this really is.
Okay.
And it has all the earmarks of a pseudonym.
Great. Okay. Well, it
Only
has
some
that.
NYU students.
It stars Harrison Pebbles, Deborah Spray, Sally Parfait, which I want to note may or may not be real names. A bunch of other folks, including James Gatsby, Ron Chaney, Angela Evans, and Natalie Drest.
Ron Chaney Jr., no less.
Ron Chaney Jr.
Really? Okay.
Yes, which also smacks of pseudonym, tiny little clues in
Indeed
there.
it does. Yeah.
Nobody in this movie's real.
So, my understanding is that this film was selected by our Patreon supporters, thanks, based on a poll of bad camp experiences, the theme of which was selected by Crook. This film won by a comfortable margin because everyone on our Patreon hates us. If you haven't yet subscribed to our Patreon, please join for as little as $1 a month and get a chance to suggest future torture for us. Force it upon us by voting in upcoming polls, and even join us watching it live on Discord.
All right. So before we dive into this movie, let's get to what beverage we're drinking. As always, drink responsibly. Alcohol is not a requirement for this show, although many members of this show do imbibe of the magic juice. And so if you do imbibe, please be responsible. Don't drive. If you're at home, don't do anything stupid. Don't drink if you don't have to, and, I don't know, enjoy like, what's his name? Tom, the Spider-Man. He's got his own non-alcoholic beer. Go drink that if you want. There you go. I don't remember what it's called. It's called like Bubble or Biro or something. Anyway, go drink that.
Boobly?
Yeah. So there you go. So, all right. So we'll start with you, Trish. What beverage are you drinking?
I am drinking filtered, pure H2O, non-contaminated with rage serum or any other taints that I'm aware of.
Does it have fluoride?
Yes, because we do not live in a state that just voted to ban fluoride from water. We are still protecting little kids' teeth and fighting tooth decay. So, H2O plus fluoride. Let's go.
But fun fact, I imagine David already knows this, and maybe Trish you do, but the Sundance Film Festival will no longer be held in Utah. It is moving to Boulder, Colorado, and taking all $132 million of its economic impact to Colorado instead. Not because of the fluoride thing, because Utah is the state we're talking about, but for another thing entirely. I don't know what the exact reason is, but there you go. But I assume one of you at least knew that.
Yes, that was indeed what I was referring to. And how about you, David? What are you drinking?
I'm having some uncontaminated absinthe.
Cool.
But he has it in like a little magic thing. You're like a straight
It's not a magic
bohemian.
thing. It's just a little Van Gogh gull.
Oh yeah, just did a little Van Gogh thing. Oh no big deal. Not a thing that the John Leguizamo from Moulin Rouge would have it in.
I don't bother with the sugar.
Fair enough. All right, me.
So-
And
Yeah.
Shaun, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a French Connection, which is a very simple cocktail made of cognac and amaretto or any variation of that. How strong you make it is really up to you. I decided today I wanted to get some, and unfortunately, I was unable to get the cognac I typically drink because it's Canadian. So I got one that's French, which is weird to me, or at least it's pretending to be French. I don't know if it actually is French. It's Saint Remy, so who knows? And then I got a different kind of amaretto. I normally get Di Serono, but I decided to try a different one, which is Italian, which somehow we could get, but not the Canadian one. I don't know. It's weird. Anyway, buy Canadian liquor because they know how to make good stuff up there.
Try.
All right, David, I have elected you to tell us what this movie is about, and so I'd like you to explain this movie to us like we're nudists who didn't graduate high school.
Oh dear.
Is that, do you want me to go into what this movie is as well and the whole nudie cutie thing?
We'll
I
get
don't
to
even
that
know
later.
what that
For
is,
now,
so yes.
just plot.
Okay, so strictly talking about plot, and again, talking about the plot for a nudie cutie is already we're getting into paradoxical territory, and possibly requiring massive rejigging of angles to fully grasp what this thing is up to. But insofar as there is a plot, we have a nurse and model roommates in New York City who decide to head off to Camp Sunshine, the nudist camp that they have both become very fond of. Unbeknownst to them, the potential boyfriend of the nurse has disposed of a severely nasty hormone liquid thingy in ways that he described as scientific, but are in fact just tossing it into the river. And it makes its way down to Camp Sunshine, where it is imbibed by Hugo, the brother of the Susanna, the camp owner, and he turns into the titular monster, looking very much like a fusion of Larry and Curly from the Three Stooges. Uh, our, uh, our protagonists and a couple of friends head off to the camp to partake in some sunshine and lack of clothes, but unfortunately Hugo gets loose, and we eventually arrive at an ending that gives the climax to 2001: A Space Odyssey a run for its money, all proportions maintained.
And also, David, I thought when you
Yes.
said nudie cutie that you were just
Yes.
making up a word. That's a real
No.
that's a real
This
thing.
is what you have watched. This is the thing, right? And I think it's going to be important to know that this is the thing, right? And the expectations that one should have going into this thing, because it's important. Because for instance, if you were expecting to go to a nudie cutie, and you went into, I don't know, The Lion King with those expectations, then you would be quite right in thinking that was the worst movie you had ever seen, because it completely failed to live up to your nudie cutie expectations. But it's not a nudie cutie. And this is a nudie cutie, and therefore there's all sorts of things that come with that.
Yeah, but see, I didn't go into this expecting a nudie cutie because I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, which then this is what I mean by there's this kind of um, like there's all sorts of things that are just normal for this, right? That if you go in expecting, I mean, we're talking about a kind of filmmaking here that is still like several orders below the means of, let's say, what Ed Wood had for Plan 9 from Outer Space, right? Which at least had an actual, there was a studio. It was a very threadbare one and very cheap, but there was a studio. right? This is something else again, right? This is, I mean, I welcome you to exploitation cinema, and I think this is the first time that Skiffy and Fandy's kind of crashed through the bottom of the B picture barrel into this whole other realm, and it is yours to discover. And I think this is probably not a bad way in this one.
Oh no, David. No. Trust me. If this is where you start, that this is also where it ends. That this is the end. Like you enter here and you go, oh, no further. You know, the Gandalf is standing at the end of this movie and saying, "You shall not pass." This.
And this is what I mean by expectations, right? Because so that was yours. I was 1 minute and 42 seconds into this film and had fallen in love
How?
because of what I was expecting versus what I got.
Oh man, we have made a mistake by letting you on this podcast. You're gonna grade this so high.
Oh, wow.
Oh. I
think it's very interesting to hear this point of view, which is so far different from mine. I want to know why, in David's eyes, this is a film worth seeing.
Well, again, it's what you're expecting, right? What you're going like this is a film made for people who knew what they were going into, right? So the nudie cutie, which I saw someone on Letterboxd quite accurately describe as an important yet stupid piece of America, a period of American cinema, has a very kind of short span, right? From the first proper nudie cutie is Herschel Gordon Lewis's and Dave Friedman's The Adventures of Lucky Pierre, and like we're at this period where censorship laws are starting to loosen up as to what can be shown. Right, we're still a long way from hardcore porn, right? And as things loosened up, one of the first things that became permissible is yes, you could show nudity as long as there was an educational uh, value, right? And so what this triggered was the nudist documentary, the nudist camp documentary. So it's not properly the nudie cutie yet, right? But this is, you can see the link here, right? And so this is already what I'm talking about. Where I mean, if you're going at this movie through the avenue of quote unquote legitimate cinema, then yeah, this is going to be the worst thing you've ever experienced. Right? It's just it's not going to uh you know have any of the or very very few of the things that you would expect, right? And like I mean, I don't know if we're going to get into the dubbing. I can talk about that when in due course.
It's so
But
bad.
all right, so you have the nudist documentary, and then the revolution, and I'm using the word loosely to quote Dave Barry, even irresponsibly, that Lewis and Friedman created with the Adventures of Lucky Pierre is that they introduced a plot, right? So suddenly there was, you could have a story and still have the nudity. Well, okay, yes, scare quotes and very large ones, but which Lewis and Company would be the first to admit, right? And then hundreds of these things were made, yeah, but in a pretty short period of time. And the Monster Camp Sunshine, we're getting to the end of that period. Right? The year before that, Lewis, by all accounts, absolutely bored out of his skull of making nudie cuties, then did Blood Feast and invented the gore film. Uh, and we're at a point now, and as we hit the mid '60s, the nudie cutie is going to wear out. It's soon going to be superseded in the exploitation realm by another word that I'm not making up and is a thing: the roughie. And we then, this history of exploitation carries on from there. But we are looking, therefore, at a tributary of the history of exploitation, which goes back, of course, to the birth of cinema. But you're looking at a history of cinema that's kind of running parallel to what you might think of as the quote unquote history of quote unquote normal movies, right? Uh, so you kind of have to set everything aside of the what feels like the normal film. This is a completely separate thing that's happening here. And Will Sloan, the co-host of the Important Cinema podcast, I think very aptly described that what we have here in The Monster of Camp Sunshine is a movie made by someone who realized that they could do anything they wanted with a nudie cutie as long as they delivered on the requisite nudity.
So, if we are doing likes for this film, would you say, David, that your like is basically its barrier breaking and its place in the history of cinematography?
Barrier breaking?
Is that?
Well,
He
this
just
one,
said
I
it
wouldn't
broke a
know.
barrier because
It did. Oh, The
interesting.
Adventures of Lucky Pierre did. This one didn't, right? This one is coming
Okay.
towards the end. But I will say, though, in a sense, yes. I mean, I don't know. Do you want me to go with my like?
Sure, David.
That's what we
The
usually
ending,
do. So,
the climax, right?
okay.
Which is, I mean, your traditional nudie cutie audience would not know what the hell hit them, right? And I would, as a close
And nor
second to
did
that,
a normal audience, I will say.
well, okay, there you go. Right. Well, nor did I. My jaw was on the ground for the entire climax, right? And I'd already decided that with the opening credits. I mean, you notice the kind of Monty Python avant la lettre animation that we were getting, right? This is 5 years before Python, and some of the stuff we're getting there. But let that aside. Then we hit that ending, and I cannot overemphasize the stunned joy I experienced during that entire sequence, right? Where that this is what the people behind this, like this is what they were getting to, right? Because you note that suddenly, right? In and amongst that incredible melange of stock footage, which defies you to believe what you are seeing, right? So we, not just footage taken from other films, but actual D-Day landing footage, but then some of the actual, footage of the film itself. Here we're suddenly getting stark night shots with the backlit silhouette of our monster, right? They suddenly cared, right? I mean, this is like it's like, okay, this is what we want to do to this with this film. We have to do all this other stuff, but we're going to get to do this. And I just would given what I experienced, and thinking what I thought I knew to expect from a nudie cutie, and already this is verging towards the roughie because we've got the monster and the axe and like the kind of like sort of proto slasher thing that's coming in. We're almost getting to the roughie, except that it's not playing for keeps as those movies would. There's also a whole subgenre of monsters and nudity, which is a whole other thing we could get into. But that that ending was just so utterly beyond what any audience of this kind of a film could possibly expect, right? That I mean again, like I'm burbling, right?
The
I
doctor
was
dropping in by parachute to deliver the serum that's going to cure
serum.
him. The what's his name? The photographer who just happens to have an arsenal in his car, and he keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger things.
The guys with bazookas arriving, and in fact, as he's parachuting down, right, and you hear him trying to yell, "I've got this! I've got the serum! I've got the antidote!" And his voice is being completely drowned out by all the explosions, right?
The artillery, yes. There's an amphibious landing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In an area with almost no real water to speak of.
Right.
Right. And you see, you are reacting exactly as intended. Like if this was meant to be funny, right?
I am
very
relieved.
clearly, right? Yeah.
Well, hold on.
No, I mean the entire film, right? But
David, we're not laughing
it
because it's actually funny. We're laughing because it's bad.
No, I'm partly laughing because it is absurd. It's bad, but
Well,
it's
fair
also,
enough. Okay,
I
'cause
think,
it's absurd.
intentionally absurd.
Yeah.
Okay, fair. Yeah.
I mean, it's I would say there's so much of this that indicates these are people who knew exactly what they were doing, right? The
Yeah, I
absurd,
think
I mean, the absurd is very very strong, right? They look at some of the animation at the beginning, right? And like the way it ends, for their final credits, and there's that the guy, the middle-aged guy doing, kind of whatever it is he's doing, the sort of push-up
Oh, he's
slash
humping the
floor
ground. Yeah.
humping thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
oh,
so we
right.
get that, and then did you notice that in the in our heroine's apartment, they have the two images of that guy that were animated. They're up on the wall beside the mirror.
I missed that. But I did
Hey,
notice
hey, see,
many of the subtitles. At first I thought they were just bad, but I became convinced later that they were being intentionally pompous and overblown, and
oh,
in
completely.
a sort of wink and a nod way.
Forces of violence are summoned, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're they're doing that on purpose. Yeah.
This
Yeah,
is the
and then the recap for those of you who and now a recap for those of you who wish to relive the film's magic moments, right? I mean, this is absolutely the same thing that Ryan George is doing at the end of pitch meeting with hi, I'm Ryan George from the thing you just watched. Here is a slideshow from the thing you just watched, right? It's the same joke
Mm-hmm.
60 years ago.
look. This is the first time I've ever felt like I'm too uneducated to appreciate the thing we're watching. I feel like I told you to explain it to me like I'm a nudist who didn't graduate. I feel like I didn't graduate from film high school because you just like elevated this thing like, oh, it's so important. Like, look at all of this stuff it's connected to, and like my brain. You're like, oh, do you remember seeing the little scene of the guy like in the bedroom and the little like it's the two things that they animated? It was there too. And I'm like, no, because my brain was leaking out of my ears by that moment because I don't know what the hell's happening.
Well, and some, I have to say, certainly by the end, so was mine, and I have rarely. I mean, it's been so long since I've had that delicious sensual pleasure of my cerebral cortex squirting out onto the floor.
Wow.
It's been far too long, and it felt so good.
Oh man, David, you and I have very different desires in our film experiences. That's for sure. Trish, do you want to jump in with what your like is?
I do have a like, actually. I was impressed by this movie not actually being all that titillating. It was there was
Sorry.
like an hour of nudity before we really got to the plot, and that was too much. It was extremely boring for a lot of the thing. Lots of people just lying around being naked, or standing around being naked, or undressing excruciatingly slowly. But the thing is, it may have been male-gazy, but it didn't make me feel skeevy. I didn't feel like, this is really disgusting having to watch this. I didn't feel like, there weren't awful men doing things to the naked ladies, or even making gratuitous nasty passes at them. It was very much more of a nudist movie than a naked exploitation movie. Yes, lots of male gaze from the camera. There were a couple of... Maybe Ken was the only nude guy, but, and we didn't even, see his privates, just his butt. So a lot more female breasts than anything else. So it was unbalanced, but it didn't feel slimy. And, it did feel like it could have been, barring the monster, a thing about, hey, nudity and nudist camps are natural and kind of nice to have the sun shining on you while you're lying on a towel in the grass. So, it could have been a lot worse, and it didn't go there. And
Okay.
that was kind of nice, even if it was too long. Way too long.
And Trish, you have absolutely perfectly summarized the principal features of the nudie cutie. That too long, and a lot of very boring, non-titillating nudity. That is the nudie cutie in a nutshell. Uh, yeah, and also the complete absence of male or female genitalia. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we're also seeing what was legally permissible then too.
I do
I
want to
assume,
say,
would this have been at an X-rated theater if it were shown in a theater at all, or would it be R-rated?
Well,
Wait, did they
there
have
wouldn't have
ratings in the 1960s?
not until the end of the '60s. So,
Okay.
but this would have but it wouldn't have been playing. I mean, it would have been in grindhouses.
Mm-hmm.
The exploitation circuit. I mean, again, it's a whole other thing, right? We're going back, decades, right? We could, if we go back to the 1930s and the 40s and the sex hygiene films, or as they were known, then the clap operas, the and all sorts of variations like that. I mean, they would not play at well, there'd be independently owned theaters.
Mm.
They'd certainly not be playing at the ones that were owned by the studios and under the studio system.
Mm-hmm.
So these would be, ratings didn't exist yet, but and these obviously did not go through the production code.
Right.
So it would be,
So
you're
this would be at a tiny indie downtown theater, not a drive-in theater. Yes?
right. Or, well, I mean, especially as we enter the mid to late '60s, I mean, you would see some of these things, not at necessarily a tiny downtown theater, but Times Square, 42nd Street,
Ah,
the former movie palaces that have now fallen onto hard times, right? So the
right.
grindhouses.
Okay. Thanks for clearing that up. So, Shaun, did you have anything you liked about this movie?
no.
Wow, I think that's a first. Nothing at all?
Uh, uh, no, I didn't enjoy this at all. It was excruciating. Like I was saying in the chat while we were watching, I was like, oh, 15-year-old me would have loved the crap out of this movie because, like, it's just full of boobs and butt. Well, the butts are not necessarily as exciting to a 15-year-old hetero me, but like, because sometimes the butts were dude butts, and today I'm more a little bit like egalitarian. Like a nice butt's a nice butt. It's all good. Right? Thor's got a nice butt. There you go. But I don't find that as exciting at 41. Gotta say, like nudity's fine. You can have a nudie moment, and it's all like that's lovely. But there's a point at which I was just like, could I get something other than nipples at this point? Could I get like maybe they could have tea and have a lovely conversation about philosophy or something instead. At least then I get nipples and philosophy, which should be a new book out by one of those presses that always does those, books like the Matrix and Philosophy book. So I just got a little annoyed. This is like me just basically airing out dislikes, whatever. I don't care. I hate this movie. That said, I will just echo something David said and actually get on topic because I need to do this, which is there are two things I found interesting. They're not good, but I found them interesting. I want to be very clear. One is the opening credit sequence with all the weird shots of the city and the guy, animated guy humping things, is cinematically the most interesting thing about the movie, sans one other sequence that David has already given us, which is the very brief moment when we get that very interesting use of lighting on the monster, which I would agree is very interesting as cinema. It just is unfortunate it is in the rest of this movie, because the rest of this movie is sort of like, I imagine, Clockwork Orange, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in Clockwork Orange, they like open his eyeballs and like make him like listen to like classical music and all of this stuff. This is that movie would be what you'd have to use. That's this for me. Like if you use this, I would give up State Secrets if you forced me to watch this again. 100%. Like, you don't even have to threaten me with it. Whatever you want to know, I'll even lie and make up stuff. It's fine. Just, you don't have to torture me with this. So, but those two things I thought were interesting. They're just, not great. Sorry to burst your bubble, David.
Well, and again, it's though, worth remembering the context, right? That you're saying, we have 41-year-old you in 2025 is going to find this terribly exciting. Now, granted, there was limits to how anybody found any of the Nudie Cooties exciting, hence their brief day in the sun, as it were. This time the joke is intended. But at the same time, remember that like this is a period where any kind of nudity on the screen, right, is a thing, right? It is a big thing. So I mean, if you go back to the earlier period of exploitation films, how did they get away with being able to show any kind of nudity legally? Well, you show genitalia that are rotting from one STD or another, or live birth. That was the footage which was the thing that made Mom and Dad one of the, in terms of how much it cost to how much it made, one of the most successful movies ever made.
That's
So
terrifying.
the kind of thing that you're getting here, right, is the like this was as good as it got as far as nudity on the screen, pretty much. Um,
Look, I understand that
so yeah.
once upon a time people didn't have a lot going for them because the stuff we have access to. Like, nowadays, if I just want to see some nakedness, I could just go to Pornhub and basically find it there in droves. And I want to be
Exactly
clear.
right.
If you go to websites like Pornhub, I'm not saying you should do this, but like, I'm aware that this exists. You can get like basically YouTube vloggers type content that just has also sex stuff in it. So like people giving you their life stories that are like the YouTube sex story. I don't know what you call it. So there's like artistic shit going on there, which again is not really my thing. But like, if that's your thing, you can find that there. But I guess if you're in 1964, you don't have a lot of options.
Right. Well, I mean, you wouldn't complain about a black and white film from the 30s, or say from the 20s or before, not being in color, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the kind of adjustment that I'm suggesting.
I appreciate it, David. I can't do it. I just can't. I'm sorry. I'm trying, man, but like, this was a painful experience. Yeah, it's rough. I'm sorry. It's just rough, David. I was expecting a monster, and what we got was like you said, like a Three Stooges. They like put some weird colors on his face, and he just goes all over the place. For those at home who are be listening to this, I'd like basically jutting out my bottom jaw and like doing weird motions with my body. Because he's not a monster. He's just a guy with anger management problems who needs a tomato garden. That's what it is.
Then I'll point you, maybe you'll enjoy this so much more. I'll point you to The Beast and the Vixens from the early 70s. This one actually has a monster. It's a Bigfoot. And he's not a bad looking Bigfoot costume, though he does have a mustache. And he doesn't actually interact with the plot. And though I would also warn you that this film, so now in the 70s and in color, I think it was the 70s, and in color, makes this look like Casablanca. For one thing, there's a some hippie dude who whips out a guitar and sings a song, and you have to hear that song in its entirety. I believe it's three times. So torture. You don't know from torture. Watch The Beast and the Vixen sometime, which is a film that exists and that I have watched, and then come back to me about the monster of Camp Sunshine, and you'll know what torture is really all about. Or at
I'm saying
least
it now. I'm banning
another
this
instance.
movie from torture cinema. We're not watching The Beast and the Vixens. It's not happening. It's on the ban list. Take that, David. uh,
I
are we on dislikes now, I guess?
think we are, yes.
Okay.
I think so.
David, what is your legitimate dislike?
Well, I think Trish touched on this already. It is too long, right? It shouldn't be 74 minutes. What the gleeful energy that I see through his first act and its third, it cannot sustain in its very long second. So the longueurs are very long here. And now I did kind of appreciate them once we like that all of this inertia then ended in this proto-apocalypse now climax, um, with the stock footage fed through a mixmaster, so that I retrospectively began to kind of appreciate the more, I don't know, Antonioni-esque stillnesses of the middle period. But yeah, it is. There's a very long fallow stretch.
I agree. We spent, I think, on the live watch of this, half the movie going, where's the monster? What's happening in this movie?
Right.
Because so much
Right.
of it is just like characters talking about being nudists and then being nudists, and like nothing happens. And then they attack
like 20
poor
minutes
Hugo.
in, I was going, there's a whole hour of this left, and I kept checking back in, there's 45 minutes of this left. When will something happen? The pacing was so bad. Agreed, totally.
Yeah.
I will also say, right? I mean, it's still, like this should have been, say, 60 minutes or 50. It would have been better. But then again, it was just 74 minutes long. And even when I was finding it sort of long, I was also remembering that, 74 minutes into the Eternals, I looked at my watch, realized how much longer was still to go, and began weeping softly and praying for death. So, perspective.
Well,
Yep.
yeah, this movie could be 13 minutes long. I really think you could take the footage we have and cut it to 13 minutes, and we would lose nothing substantial from the plot, such as it is. We'd still get to have a little bit of your nipples and your butts, and the nudist thing, and also the monster, and just enough of the like weird discount proto-apocalypse now thing at the end, with the one cool shot of the lights behind him with the fog and everything. You could do that. And if someone wants to pay me, I will do it.
You could, of course, it would be unreleasable as a short feature.
Why?
The thing no, I mean, just in terms of how this film would have been financed and come into being, it had to be feature length. And so there we go.
Yeah, but it's 2025 now, David.
As an experimental short, that would have been something, yeah.
Well, we're going to be airing it at Sundance this year. Here we go.
So you implied this, I think, David, you implied earlier that this might have been someone's student film project or something?
Oh, I have no idea. I mean, it feels like, I mean, there's stuff going on here, right? I mean, there's so much here that I mean, this is someone, they're basically taking the piss out of the Judy Cootie genre. Now, who did it? I don't know. Right? I've seen people saying that this feels like some kind of some NYU student project or some kind. we have no evidence to know, like who exactly did it. Vinegar Syndrome describes it as a bunch of a bunch of maniacs
Maniacs.
producing this trash, this berserk piece of trash art. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, it certainly has. This is made by somebody who knows about movies, right? And who knows things about film and how to have fun with them. And it is, again, like to quote Will Sloan, it's like, okay, as long as I deliver the nudity, all right, then I can do whatever the hell I want. And so we get all of that other stuff at the kind of the first part and the latter part of the film, and we do get a surprising amount of a surprising degree of terrific 1960s footage of New York City in a in a movie nominally about a nudist camp.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
sorry, I went on a digression. Trish, you were going into your
No, you
dislike, I think.
answered my question. My dislike. Well, since we have certainly covered the pacing issue, and I'm not even going to address how little sense this makes, even little things like, if you throw a bottle of contaminant into the Hudson, it is not going to go upstate to where you might conceivably have a nudist camp. But anyway, the thing that really, really bothered me, in addition to the pacing, was the jarring incongruousness of the soundtrack.
Okay.
My sister asked me if this was a movie you could at least fold laundry to, and I had to say no, because the music is too irritating. There is no reason for people at a nudist camp, lolling around on the sun to be listening to, ragtime band music. I think it would have made sense if they had been listening to folk music or, some kind of weird, 60s
rock.
version. Yeah, vaguely rock or something like that. Or, even, I don't know, maybe they could only afford, music that had gone into public domain already or something. I don't know where they got the
totally been
soundtrack from. It was totally
this would have just been
wrong for
library
everything
music.
we were seeing. It was just so bad, and I think the move that it made the movie last twice as long in my head because nothing matched. The soundtrack did not match what we were looking at, and it was like, no, why are we listening to Alexander's Ragtime Band? Not that they use that particular song, but it was like, this doesn't match, and it just I hated that soundtrack I don't know why, if they chose it deliberately, or if they just shoved whatever music they could find free into the thing.
It totally would have been library music, right? Just whatever was free. And though you also note that they actually work it into the diegesis of the film when we have like one of the first sort of inappropriate tracks, and then the one of the roommates saying, "Can you play something else? This is really depressing me," right? So like the winks are going in, but yeah, I mean this like. I mean, I would see too the like that as kind of part and parcel of the other sound aspects. I mean, you notice how wonky the voices were, right?
They're awful.
How there may have been,
Although
in
partly
fact,
that was bad delivery.
well, though obviously, but what's let me put it this way: the fact that there were voices, there may not have been enough different voices to go with the number of characters. I'd have to, sort of give it another watch, but the fact that we had some characters speaking and the post sync voices more or less matched the lip movements,
Mm-hmm.
and and when people did speak, there were actually some conversations. luxury. You have no idea how privileged you were to get this in this kind of a film, right?
David, that's
I would
like
do.
saying, no, hold on. That's like saying you're standing in shit, but at least it doesn't have cholera in it. Like,
Well, listen. I would direct your attention to, well, let's say I think arguably who is now perhaps one of the most celebrated figures and one of the become one of the most important figures in this period of the exploitation film, and that's Doris Wishman, who was also pretty much the only woman, well, one of the few women to be working behind the camera in this period. And so she went through the period of, like, she did the nudie cuties, like Nude on the Moon, and then we kind of
nude
would move
on the
into the
moon.
roughies. Yeah. They wore little kind of pipe cleaner antennas and stuff. And then into the roughies with things like Bad Girls Go to Hell and Another Day, Another Man. Uh,
Huh.
and then sort of more, even more sort of nudity heavy films in the later with things like Double Agent 73, which is exactly what you think it might mean, and Deadly Weapons. At any rate, in her films, you will very rarely hear dialogue and see someone say that line at the same time. So in most conversations, whoever is speaking has their back to the camera, or we're at a distance and
Oh,
we can't see
sure.
them, or there's a voiceover filling you in like this is radio as to what the gist of their conversation was. You'll also get tracking shots of the sky and cutaways to feet and doorknobs and ferns and all sorts of surreal aspects. But like her career kind of encapsulates a lot of this period. Right now, I'd also mentioned when I said she was one of the few women working behind the camera. There's also Roberta Finley, and were later in the period with she and her husband Michael basically creating the really important roughies. And side note, we want upstate monsters. A whole Shriek of the Mutilated is a film I cannot recommend highly enough in this context, and I just have to mention that. But anyway, the so like I was actually astonished when we started seeing people having conversations and we were hearing them.
Hmm.
I would not have been surprised if the whole film went with if had gone with intertitles, or that we would have just had characters facing away from the camera. I, I was amazed by how much dialogue we actually had, even if it was
By
very obviously
intertitles,
post-synced.
you mean like the silent movie style captions?
Oh,
Uh-huh.
God. David, I love you, but if you give this movie anything better than a B plus, you are banned from this show for life. You are talking too much about how, like, oh, look at all this interesting history and how great this movie is, and like all the things it's doing that are so interesting, and you're so lucky to have it because it's not a cholera infested shit, and like all of this stuff. And I'm getting terrified right now. I feel like I'm living in a horror movie where my reality is collapsing around me because we're going to get to the end of this and Trish and I are going to be sensible, right? And we're going to be like, oh, it's an F or like a D minus or, something vaguely in the it's not good category, right? At this point, Trish, you could give it a C minus and I would be happy with this. At this point, I don't think you're going to do it, but at least then I would be like, oh my God, sanity has prevailed. But David, right now, I'm so terrified. You're going to give it like A plus, greatest movie in the world. It's literally like Stanley Kubrick on steroids. Like, I'm losing it, David. I'm losing it.
My work here is done.
Shaun, David is entitled to like what he likes.
No! No!
And to find joy in whatever way he can in this movie.
In this bleak world, we have to, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh. I don't have enough alcohol. Okay.
Hey, we've broken Sean.
Yeah, I'm not gonna survive this one.
Well, It's almost over. I guess we can just go ahead and move on to ratings if you don't want to.
No, there's enough to dislike about this movie. Look, I think the thing that I most disliked about this movie is the thing that David's now going to give us a lecture about how it's not normal for them to have this in the first place. So I'll just say it, David, and then I'll step aside for you to explain this. Which is just, there is obviously meant to be a plot in this. There's a story. There's like a couple different stories, but like there is a story there.
Uh-huh.
And you can tell that story and have lots of nipples and butts. That is entirely possible. But so much of the movie just forgets that there's a story. And so randomly we just get scenes that like, oh, hey, remember, there's an urtext to this that we're commenting upon, but we'll come back to it in 25 more minutes after we show you a sea of butts and stuff, and random photo shoots will get long sequences of, and all this. And then you'll get another clip, and then another one. And it's kind of weird to me because there's early in the movie, one of the characters is like assaulted by a bunch of rats with the rage virus in them, apparently.
So awesome.
And somehow falls out a window, and it's hanging from the window in what is the most nonsensical thing. And for a moment, they act like this is an important scene. And then they go to the nudist camp at Camp Sunshine, and it is never raised again. And it's sort of like, but the rats had the rage virus. Isn't that kind of important? And it's like, no, 25 minutes later, we'll get a reference to it again. Like he distilled it, and then he takes the jar, throws it into the, he basically makes rage whiskey and throws it into the Hudson River, and it floats up. And then poor Hugo, the gardener who just desperately wants to grow tomatoes in upstate New York, right? He somehow drinks it because that's what you do when you find a mysterious jar in the mason jar in the frickin'
He just
river.
drank from the stream that he didn't know was contaminated.
It's a little more complicated than that. There's some fishermen partway between.
Oh, that's right.
Joke. The bay and yeah, there is a little more complication in there. A fisherman fishes out some bicycle tires and other trash, including the jar, and then he breaks the jar so the contaminant gets into the water.
Yeah,
and
discount Gilligan. Yeah.
Yes, discount Gilligan. And later, Hugo, while he is fishing, is thirsty and drinks water from the stream. Now, I have to wonder, does this mean that, fish are rage virused all over the Hudson, and, are other people in, the upstream Hudson River Valley, are they getting rage virus stuff too? But no, it's true, Shaun, we never hear about any of the broader ramifications of this.
Yeah.
I just adore the fact that you felt that circumstances compelled you to say the phrases, it's a little more complicated than that, and broader ramifications in the context of a nudie cutie, right?
Misplaced expectations, I suppose. Well, I already said I'm not going to criticize the nonsensicalness of this. So, that's you just have to kind of roll with that, I suppose.
Well, it is very much the point, right? I mean, it's meant to be nonsensical.
I don't mind that.
Yeah.
I don't mind it being ridiculous. I think it's just, I would prefer it just to commit to a bit and then tell, because there's moments, so I'm glad you brought up the fisherman, right? We were all sitting there wondering, this is a very weird scene, because it's obviously it's blatantly comedic. He's fishing stuff out of the Hudson that is anything but what he's actually fishing for. Or is it what he's fishing for? We don't know. But it's, tires and random pieces of debris and all kinds of stuff. Obviously a comedy bit, right? And so that made me go, is this whole time this is supposed to be a comedy? But then so much of the rest of the film is it's absurd, but it's not played as comedic. And then there are scenes where it's but they're really talking about being nudists as in a very serious, being a nudist is not a big deal. Like bearing your bits and baubles is not a big deal. And it's like almost like kind of this now. It makes sense now, David. It's like weirdly educational about like what nudists are like. Those are two very different tones.
Well, if you look at absurdist theater, I mean, that's usually played straight, and really weird stuff is happening during it. And, you know, it's comedic, but it's talking about how crazy life is. You know, it's so, I think that's kind of the point. You know, these people, the people in the movie aren't laughing. Because they're living life in an absurd world, and they're just living their lives. But we, the viewer, are supposed to comprehend the absurdities of life. So yeah, I don't think it's supposed to be an uproarious comedy. I think it's not riotous laughter. Just look at how weird and absurd life is. More like that.
Okay.
Yeah, and the also that like and also sorry, I need to correct myself. And I mentioned the Adventures of Lucky Pierre starting this a couple years before that. We had Russ Meyer's The Immoral Mr. Tease. I was forgetting that. But the like that discussion about nudity. I mean, so Dave Friedman estimates that something like 600 nudie cuties were made during the 60s, right? So, and like that kind of conversation by 1964, the audience would know that conversation by heart, right? It's like getting another origin story in a Marvel movie, but now the one you've encountered hundreds of times now, right? So like that, like in some ways, like that conversation. I mean, here I'm not sure, but it does strike me as surprisingly late in the game for of this kind of a film. And I mean, I don't have a lot to go by here, but that it strikes me as wow, that like we had all this stuff with the rats and dangling from the window and like all that wacky business of the first act, and until finally we get to that, which seemed like the kind of like, okay, here's the stuff that that in some ways I would imagine the audience were kind of expected to get in the first couple of minutes, but it took its sweet time to get to that point.
Yes, it did.
First, you had to get through the rats.
Good Lord. I think we have to do. Look, we cannot have an episode that's longer than the movie we watched. So we definitely have to do final thoughts and grades, I think, at this point. And so, David,
Okay.
since you have given us 3 different lectures from your lecture series on the history of underground cinema, I'll start with you. What is your final thought and grade for this movie, please?
I mean, I had so much fun watching this last night. Like, this is the kind of thing that I live for, right? Putting something on and like suddenly seeing the stuff like this kind of like the unexpected art coming out of the crevices. And I would take something like this or Sin You Sinners or Scream of the Butterfly any day over $300 million of extruded content, if you want to talk about shit. So yeah, I mean, you must have been psychic, Sean. For me, this is a B plus.
Oh my God! Ah! Trish, just go.
I
Just
can't.
go. Do it.
I owe you a debt of thanks for all of you for having for this having come up and getting to do this, because I would have sat on my shelf for I don't know how much longer, but no, had to watch it last night. And it's like, oh my God, suddenly the face of God revealed itself to me. Why did I take so long to get around to this?
So you're
You're
like,
welcome.
oh yeah, this is the stuff.
This is the
welcome.
stuff, exactly. Right into the veins.
Okay.
Just ram that plunger down.
All right. For me, this feels like the most boring film I've ever watched. Although punctuated by absurd violence at times. But, like I said, it wasn't really gratuitous, and the music was very bad, but there was not much that was really gratuitously offensive about it. I mean, I don't like that poor Hugo gets chained in a shed, and that's apparently the solution to the problem. Kind of like the end of Shaun of the Dead, where, the friend gets chained up in the basement, and they watch videos with him after he's zombified. Anyway, but Hugo doesn't even get that. He's just chained up in a shed. Nothing to do, just howling there. Poor thing. That is sad. But it wasn't awful. It was boring. I wanted it to end, but it could have been worse. And so I'm going to give it a D-, not an F. D- for me.
Oh, man. I
understand your points, David, but for someone who's not a film student, D-.
You telling me that you're not going to be further exploring the reaches of the exploitation realm, or the hundreds of nudie cuties that are out there for you, or the complete oeuvre of Doris Wishman?
I guess if
Goodnight to Dismember with its
if our
live slow motion
Patreons
murders.
keep, if Shaun puts something like this up on another poll and the Patreon
I couldn't
people
believe
vote
it
for
when I
it,
saw that on the poll. These people understand what they're in for.
It'll never happen again.
I would not commit an axe murder to avoid having to watch another movie like this, but I certainly would not seek out other movies like this.
Yeah.
So, D-. How about you, Shaun?
I hate this movie. I despise it. It made me wish that it was properly censored at the time it was released and was burned. Burned somewhere in an island off the coast of some place, and then just left the ashes. They used the ashes, and then they used that to start another fire to burn other movies that were bad. I don't really actually believe this, by the way. I don't really believe that, because I don't think you should burn movies, because I think David and I both are very similar in our desire for having more things preserved. So I get it. But I hate this movie.
Isn't it amazing seeing this in absolutely pristine condition, right? Looking better than it presumably ever did in any of its projections. I mean, Vinegar Syndrome is doing God's work with their preservation and restoration efforts.
Yeah, you have to give it credit for that. It wasn't grainy. It wasn't, you weren't squinting in the dark to try to figure out what was happening. That's true.
Sure. And, when Deaf Crocodile releases the higher quality remasterings of old East German science fiction films that we're now covering on the blog, I will say, those films aren't necessarily great films, but, they're preserving film history in a very important way. I'll be honest, David, this might have been improved by being seen in grainy footage.
Well, and I actually, in all seriousness, I do take your point. There have been some films that I like. The first time I saw Shriek of the Mutilated was in a print that was kind of, they had damage and some was going kind of pink. I mean, it looked like it had been through the wars. There's a few others I've seen that way that have that. You can almost you finish watching the film and and you feel like your shoes are sticky from the floor in the theater. And there is something of the kind of their natural environment, seeing them that way. So there's something I'm glad that I do. I mean, that said, would I am I disappointed that it has been so beautifully preserved? No, I'm not. But I do actually get what you're talking about there.
I don't know that we're talking about quite the same thing, but let's just go with that. It's an F- for me. I under no circumstances would I ever watch this again. You cannot pay me. I'm not paid to do this now. So, no. I hate this movie. Oh, God. All right.
So I think that averages to something like a D+, maybe, or a C-. I guess Paul will tell us soon.
Oh, my God. Paul, you grade the movie now. We average to a D+. Jesus.
Just under a D+, says says Prince Justin.
I need you to understand, like, Daniel has somewhere the actual, like, database of everything listed out that has all the grades in it and all the averages. And there are films that we rated worse than this that I have watched again since we did the torture cinema.
Will it make you feel better if it's quite likely that at some point I will watch this again? And so then that kind of evens out with those other ones?
No, David, because I've seen you at conventions, right? Like, I could make a movie and, like, put it in, like, a Blu-ray box, like, that looks like I printed it in my basement, and it could just say, like, you know, the alien tit suckers of demon hell or something, and then it would have, like, you know, Dracula, like, somehow Bela Lugosi's in it, somehow, and you would be like, holy shit, that's a secret Bela Lugosi movie I didn't know about, and you would buy it immediately. To be fair, that sounds exciting, what I just said, so this is a really bad example, because I actually might buy that now. I just owned myself. Because that sounds fun. Okay.
I think you could con David like that.
I can't. No, because, see, David would know, like, if that film existed, he'd know the history of, like, how it got made and all of, like, the studio people behind it. And then he would make it interesting. And then I would be in this position I'm in now where, like, I'm being pulled in two directions. My, like, film history interested guy is being pulled this way. And my, but film critic guy is being pulled this way. And, like, I just feel like my soul is ripping apart right now, David.
Again, my work is done, but I guess bonus done.
Fair enough. So we average out to a D+. All right, folks. Well, if you'd like to let us know what you thought about this episode, you can do so at skiffyandfanty@gmail.com. You can obviously suggest films and themes for our polls for Torture Cinema. So if you have any ideas, please let us know. I would like to schedule a whole lot of polls very, very soon. Please join our Discord via our Patreon page, because you can also talk to us there. So some of the folks in chat at the moment are, in fact, on there, and they're free to suggest polls and all kinds of things to us. If you'd like to find us on all the social channels, we're Blue Sky, Threads, Mastodon, we're on YouTube and all these places, skiffyfanty.com/skiffythings. Like that. And then every Friday on twitch.tv/alphabet streams, we are there 7 p.m. Central Fridays for whatever show. This is where we record our shows live. So please come out. And then obviously go to patreon.com/skiffyfanty if you want to support the show. Literally $1 is better than, like, nothing. So if you want to support us, please do. And you get access to the Discord, and you can yell at me about how mean I was to David while he cackled maniacally, like the villain that he is. I love you, David. This is why I like having you on for stuff, because you know some weird history about film, and you do make it interesting. I will give you credit there.
Yes.
So,
thank you.
You're welcome. You are the person I go to whenever I'm watching, like, a weird horror film or some strange film. I'm like, David probably knows something about this because he's read some book somewhere. Yeah. Me, I'm at ShaunDuke.net. Alphabet streams on Twitch, Wednesdays and Sundays, 6 p.m. Central. I'm on various things, ShaunDuke.net/DukeThings.
You can find me on Facebook and on Mastodon at David Annandale at social.horrorhub.club.
You can find me on Blue Sky at P.E. Matson, on Mastodon at TrishM@newsy.social, on my blog at whatsthewordnow.blogspot.com, and reviewing and podcasting at Skiffy and Fanty.
All right. As required by the bylaws, I'm supposed to make this happy because that's the rule. We changed the bylaws this year, so I will just say that despite all of the ribbing today, David, I do hope you understand it is all in good fun, and I genuinely really do adore all the I let me put it this way. I really super appreciate that you can find joy and interesting things and stuff to appreciate about media that most people would just dismiss as trash, which is kind of what the role I played today. I just think that's a special thing about you that I really do enjoy, because now I have to think about this movie differently, which hurts, but is also because you say smart things and you bring a lot of very interesting history. And this is why it's lovely to have you for these shows.
Well, thank you so much, and it's always such a pleasure. And I mean, and though in honesty, I have to say, I'm far from being the only one in, in this, and I look forward to the day 10, 15 years from now, where you start telling us about your fifth rewatch of the film, and how things have changed.
Uh, David, I will have
Learning is
watched
fun.
Mac and Me 5 times or more before I watch this 5 times. I'm just telling you. Because I have already watched Mac and Me this year. So there you go. All right. On that note, happy ending and scene.
Okay.